Hello and welcome to Detective Comics from the Comic Crush. This is our not short series, our limited series, shall we say, on Batman rereads, in where you get to choose the theme each week of the books that we reread. We're not going to tell you what books they are, of course. It remains a secret until the episode airs. I'm sure some of you can guess from the episode titles. Speaking of which, this episode is called Verses. We've kind of done this to tie in. We're hoping by the time this goes out, because these are all sort of pre-recorded months ahead, but we're hoping by the time this goes out, the Batman versus Deadpool versus Batman has dropped from, I think the first issue is coming from Marvel, and the second a few months later from DC. Let's bring Hemen on. How you doing, man?
I'm not bad, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I am suffering because we're recording this in the what will become known as the long hot summer of 2025, and being a larger gentleman, it is killing me.
It will be quite apt for the first book, because I always consider part of the one of the franchises we're going to talk about is definitely It's Always Hot. I definitely characterize sweat with that franchise. If there's not sweat on screen, it's a poor installment of the film.
It is really. I would love to see one of these. I'm sure the audience has already guessed what it's going to be. I'd love to see one of these set during the winter, but I guess that wouldn't be of any interest to the particular race that we're going to talk about. We are, of course, going to be discussing Batman versus Predator, the very first one. We're not doing any of the sequels or later stuff that came after that, just the first sort of 4-issue miniseries. We are also going to be discussing Batman Judge Dredd Judgment on Gotham. And again, with that, we're just discussing the very first one they put out, not talking about any of the others. The illustration you see there was actually I can't remember if it was a pin-up or a variant cover. I don't think it was a variant, because variants weren't massively part of the comics ecosystem back when this came out in the sort of early 90s. I think this was like a cover for one of the issues or a pin-up. So that's Mike Mignola, the great Mike Mignola, doing Batman versus Predator there. I love this illustration, as I do all Mike's stuff. Doesn't do the interiors. So you get Dave Gibbons writing this, which was, I imagine, quite interesting for the time, because I'm not sure how much writing Gibbons had done. He'd obviously done a ton of art. He was the artist on Green Lantern for a very long time, and then the artist on Watchmen, of course, and some of those amazing Alan Moore Superman stories that you can find in the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow collection. I'm not sure if this was the first thing he ever wrote, but I think it's quite early on. So I've read this without reading any of the introductions to the trade or any of the background material. I've just had to kind of speed through and read it. So I think this came out in 1992, was collected in 93 for the first time. I've got the old DC Dark Horse edition there.
Yeah, that's how I had to collect them. So I got all of these books from eBay, and amazingly, so these 3 issues and the Judge Dredd single issue only cost me about 20 quid all in for all of them.
Yeah.
Considering they're quite they're nice paper stock, like they're sort of hardback, which, I guess DC kind of do something similar with their variant copies now. But
yeah,
it's a very interesting sort of, was it prestige style? What?
Yeah, so there's a big issue with paper stock. It's really weird, because Dark Horse, I remember paper stock was the thing I first really noticed, or came to appreciate in retrospect, funny enough, through Dark Horse Hellboy comics, because Hellboy comics, drawn by Mike Mignola, contain vast pages of blackness, just black, and colours on black. And he uses negative space and black very, very well. Probably better than any other artist I know. Or certainly one of the best. Now, if you were trying to read Hellboy books in the late 90s in a room where you had a light on, you were fucked. Because what would happen is that light up in your room, unless you were a skilled cinematographer, I'm sure Roger Deakins could have read them quite easily. But unless you were a skilled cinematographer, you were absolutely fucked, because that light would hit that page and just bounce off and shine right into your fucking corneas, and you would be like, it was horrible, and it really ruined the effects. And I think they've gone to great lengths as the years have gone on down the road, and try and dial that back a bit. But glossy paper is not my favorite. I much prefer. So a couple of years back, DC pioneered a kind of new type of newsprint, which I'm sure to a certain extent was just a monetary decision. They just reached, oh yeah, actually we can get this for, $1,200 a ream rather than $1,500 a ream. So we're switching to this. And it was beautiful. So a lot of their books, like they published their Catwoman series, which was written and drawn by Joel Jones on it. Batman and everything was just put out on this beautiful newsprint. They extended that into the collected editions. Of course, I think they've since gotten rid of it. Because sod you, right? Like, why do your opinions matter as a reader? And move to something else. But these were done on a kind of, I don't know what the paper is. I'm not that well versed. But the texture that it gives you, especially with the inks and colours, is absolutely glorious. And I love it in these.
It does feel like I've received a proper book. Not that comic books aren't proper, but you know what I mean? I guess comic books were traditionally, something cheap you would get from a newsstand, back way before I was born. These feel almost like a trade paperback, albeit thinner. It was very cool. It kind of added this kind of, these are the forbidden sacred texts from the 90s or something.
But it's a funny thing, because if you were to buy the single comics of Batman versus Predator, they would still cost you like 10 or 15 quid, those 3 or 4 issues, because they're still quite highly sought after. And they're always worth keeping an eye out for, because they are good kind of resellers, if that's your thing. Now the Judge Dredd one, which I think is this isn't Titan, this is Fleetway. So Fleetway books have I got the big volume. Did you get the big one like this?
I think that's what I've got, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't. So this is like an oversized.
No, I don't have that. No, mine is normal comic size.
Right.
Yeah.
So this, I don't know if they put this out just as a one-off thing, because this you can get quite often secondhand. So this is like a second printing, I think, and it's done at sort of roughly 2000 AD size. And 2000 AD put a lot of their books out in a bigger format. Now, the only trouble is this paper, when it seems to break down, or at least the old sort of 80s version of this paper, when it seems to start breaking down, which all comics do after time, all your trades will do eventually on a long enough timeline. But if you go and pick up the old secondhand 2008 books now, chances are they'll stink of piss. Because I think there's something in that paper that's I'm not fucking kidding. I am not kidding. I'll tell you a funny story in a minute. So I think it's ammonia based.
Okay.
I think, but it reeks of piss. And a couple of years back, maybe this might have even been like last year, I found an edition of a book that I really regret getting rid of, which was Alan Moore's Superman stories, Whatever Happened to Man Tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
But it was done in a UK volume via Titan Books called, I guess actually it might have been the Titan Books that do this, Titan or Fleetway. It was done in a UK edition just called The Man of Tomorrow. and it had a grey tone cover, and this like a silhouette of Superman, and the S was just an embossed gold laid in kind of. It was gorgeous, this thing. And all the art inside, because this is how they did it back then, was all black and white. So it was all that art, black and white, inked art, no colours. It had a fucking amazing introduction, and commentary on the books. And then, you know, you got to look at all this beautiful Gibbons art and fucking Kurt Swan art and Alan Moore writing. And I really, really fucking regret letting go of this book. And then I found it one day secondhand, and I just took it home, and I was like, I'm really excited to get into this again. And I opened it up, and you just got, you know, like in London, if you live in London, and they every now and then they'll come along and jet clean the pavements in London, and what you'll get is this giant vapor of piss just rising up and hitting you in the eyes, because unfortunately, you know, despite the quite bewildering number of toilets in London, people can't seem to do anything except piss in the streets. I'm such an old man. You get like this vapor of piss, and I immediately had to sort of get rid of that book, unfortunately. I was gutted. I was so fucking upset, because it's just like, there's no way I can keep this. It just absolutely reeks piss.
I'm just staring at the trades and hardbacks on my phone. which of them smell of piss? And no,
well, none of them, because it's all different. It's all different bindings now and different paper stocks and things like that. But it's just something about that particular. I'd like to know if anyone else experiences a problem, or if it's just one of those occasions where, unfortunately, I've picked up a couple of pissy books.
Sorry, I'm just picturing you posting Batman and Predator image on Instagram. Please comment, and then just people commenting all underneath.
Piss books.
Yeah, all of the piss books. Well, if you know, I know you're after engagement, but I think that's going to take a whole different category of.
Scat social. Yeah, no one wants that. Anyway, moving on now. You've had that introduction. This is gold, folks. I mean, you are not going to get an introduction like that on any other podcast, are you? Really? You're welcome.
Well, I had no idea about piss books, but now I do. So.
Now you don't. Be careful what you pick up secondhand on eBay, mate. That's all I'm going to say to you.
Yeah, I'm going to. But I was going to say, this is the first. So I picked these up on eBay. These are the first time I've ever read these, and I think that 13-year-old me, which would have been how old I would have been roughly at the time, I think it would have blown my mind. Like the reaction I had to have seen, I guess, the Keaton Batman, the original Predator. If I'd read this at the time, I think, you know, wow. Reading it now for the first time, I actually enjoyed them. I think they are far better than they have any right to be. They're utterly inconsequential, but I think the rule of cool just punches through. It's just, there's something really, about it. Like, this isn't deep. It isn't clever. It's just fucking But I thought crossover books were bad. But these are really fun. So what, have I just got it wrong? Is it just because they're scarce and I didn't get the opportunity to read them that much? Because I guess after the first printing or whatever, they tend to disappear because of, I guess, rights or what have you.
Yes, so there is that, and there's been a lot lately made of the fact that DC and Marvel have republished their original crossovers. And those are apparently going to be a very limited thing, although, you know, still available in Omnibus. At least one of them is. I think there was one that keeps getting delayed.
But no Justice League and Avengers, which is... But anyway.
Well, that's a different thing, because that was republished for charity.
Yeah, I think it was.
I can't remember what the charity was, Heroes something or other. And it is annoying if you just want to buy and read that book.
Yeah, I've got them individually, in fairness, but I think it's one of those books that I read it because who doesn't want to read Marvel and DC characters coexisting? But I had no expectations. I thought this would just be a bit fluffy. But it's actually genuinely good fun. I thought it's a genuinely good book.
If you've got the right writer, and I think that particular book was written by Kurt Busiek, who is a writer who's written for both Marvel, DC, and for independents, and he humanizes like no other writer I know. Like he humanizes, and like it's like if you ever read Astro City. I don't know if you've ever read that, but that is a masterpiece of superhero humanization. Now, crossovers. Quick thing on crossovers. There are a bunch of different types of crossovers. There are crossovers within a universe where Superman crosses over into Batman and things like that. There are crossovers where a bunch of different books will be tied together for an event. There are crossovers where the characters don't actually meet, but the books are all part of one story. And there are intercompany crossovers, which is where Publisher A, so Dark Horse, goes to DC and goes, look, we've got an idea for this. Quite famously, Dark Horse is probably one of the most successful crossovers is, of course, Aliens versus Predator. Now, that came about sort of by accident. I think at the time they were discussing it, so it would have been in the early 90s, Predator 2 had come out, which featured, as a throwaway joke, the alien skull in the trophy room. So that was kind of on everyone's minds. And then in a meeting, as it's told in the introduction to the book, in a meeting at Dark Horse, they got to the end of the meeting and they decided to sort of spitball some ideas for crossovers of some of their characters. To possibly do as a a sort of money maker, whatever. And they apparently had gotten down to really bad ones like Roachmeal versus Flaming Carrot, which are characters from the Mystery Men, or like Flaming Carrot is from the Mystery Men, which a lot of people don't know. The comic book movie Mystery Men, Ben Stiller, was actually a comic. So they'd gotten down to that, and some genius said Aliens versus Predator, because the Dark Horse owned the licensing rights to both those characters, and they were producing separate comics. And they got that up and running quite quickly. And I think within a year that book was out, and it started off in one like Dark Horse Presents, and then its own 4-issue miniseries and this, and became a huge fucking thing. The film versions of that have only ever been terrible, as we've seen. But intercompany crossovers used to be more common, and now they're not.
Yeah.
Because
this Batman Deadpool this is the first crossover between these two in like 20 years. I think it's been advertised.
I think it's the first crossover ever between Batman and Deadpool. But between Marvel and DC.
Yeah, Marvel and DC. Yeah, like 20 years. Although I'm more excited for, I believe there's some backups, including Joe and Jeff. So that's the one I've got my eye on.
Yeah, I would love that. That's going to be Jeff is one of the best modern comic creations.
I feel like, well, to be honest, I'll read anything that Kelly Thompson writes. She is just absolutely fantastic.
She is a fucking genius, and I really love her books. I'm very much behind on her stuff at the moment, so I've not read Birds of Prey yet, but
that's great.
Absolute Wonder Woman as we
fantastic. She's got an indie as well called Black Cloak, which is a fantasy detective.
Yeah, that I've not read. I think I've read the first issue or two. I really loved. There was another thing she did called The Cull with Matthew de Uliths. I can't pronounce their name probably. But that was amazing. I contacted Kelly once about doing like a video interview with her for Black Widow, because at the time she was writing the ongoing Black Widow book. But I don't think she likes doing video interviews. She just didn't do it. But I might contact her again about doing a written interview, maybe, or something like that, or an audio only, because I'd love to talk to her about the stuff she does. She's great.
She's absolutely fantastic, and reading Black Cloak in particular made me think, oh, she'd be a great pick one day to do Batman if she was interested.
Yeah.
Because I mean, with the Birds of Prey stuff as well, she just anyway, yeah.
I'm not sure she. But the thing is, I think she very much and very purposely does female-led stories, which I think is great. I think is great. Anyway, we the writer of this is Dave Gibbons. Yeah. Now, when I interviewed Dave last year or the year before about his autobiographical book that he put out, which was fantastic. He actually said to me, and I was quite surprised that he said it on camera in the interview. He was like, "Yeah, I'm not drawing anymore. I'm done with that. I'm writing only." And I wonder if, in a way, that was always in his mind, because artists do have to be multi-talented. It's not always necessary for a writer to be able to draw, but it's definitely necessary for an artist to be able to write.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how many of them do it full script. I've got an artist friend who just does like 3x5 cards, and she says I plot it out on cards, and I double check that to make sure the page turns are okay, and then I start roughing out the art. So she doesn't do full script, as far as I know. And I think, there's things like the Marvel method where you're kind of given a storyline, and then the artist goes off and creates the art for that, and then the writer will come back in and fill in the dialogue as necessary. That sounds like a bizarre way to work to me, like that screams trouble. But artists will find ways to shortcut story. I think that in a lot of comics, and I think Marvel comics are especially guilty of this, the writing tends to start to overpower the art. And I think that a lot of writers, because of the Marvel method, because they feel they have to, and I'm not having a go at them as writers, they're all excellent writers, but I think people feel like they have to reassert themselves over the material. And it's just like, look, I bet that the artist can do this in cuts, and
Well, that's what I find those. I tend to buy a lot of sort of oversized, whether it be deluxe or absolute or whatever editions, and I always love the behind the scenes stuff where you have those writers that say, "Well, look, here's the script, here's like the pencils," and I love that some of the artists will read something and say, "Yeah, I can tell that story in just a panel. We don't need all this text. We can just, I can show you that." And that, I love that stuff when it's like, yeah, you really have nailed that moment in just an image rather than a wall of text.
And actually, a lot of that will come into play when we talk about Judge Dredd, I think. But this is drawn by written by an incredible writer who was an artist, drawn by an excellent artist who's done amazing work now on, in recent years on Batman. Funny enough, he was doing Morrison's Batman, like the initial runs of that, Batman and Son, and the art here is incredible. So the pitch is that a predator comes to Earth, and starts hunting the criminal element in Gotham.
Yeah, I kind of saw it as. Clearly Predator 2 must have come out by the time this is written, because this feels like Predator 2, but it's in Gotham rather than LA.
Yeah.
So like the apex predator comes to Gotham until he runs up against Gotham's own apex predator, Batman.
So that's one of the opening pages where the predator kind of finds a place to live in a junkyard, which I thought was quite interesting. Because obviously, had this guy not armed himself with a shotgun, he'd probably live through this. if you are listening to this at home, obviously there will be a slideshow on the podcast page on the website, so you can flick through the images. But if you are watching this on YouTube, I would suggest, as always, that you blow up the screen to the maximum size you can, and just sort of catch some of this gorgeous art. There's some great stuff happening in this. It's so, like, Kubert's stuff is really nicely textured, and I think here he's being inked by Adam Kubert, his brother. They all came out of, obviously they're all Joe Kubert's sons. There's also, I believe, Katie Kubert, who is a writer and an editor, and she's done some really great stuff. She's worked at, I think, most of the major comic companies. And they all draw a little bit like Joe Kubert. Wow. There's no getting around that. And he had that same kind of really textured feel to his art. I quite like the fact that the Predator kind of does best Batman in this.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised by that. Yeah. So I think it's the end of the first issue, isn't it? It's like an almighty fight in the junkyard where Batman does get bodied, for lack of a better term. He does,
and he spends a fair old chunk of the book in like a full body cast almost.
Yeah, I think issue 2 is him completely out of it as Gotham falls to pieces. I do love as well, like you were showing off the art there, that they do absolutely hit the marks of the film. Like you've got, I like how the camouflage suit is kind of captured, because that must be really hard to sort of get a image. I've always panels that are the heat vision tracking. It's really on brand for Predator. They've taken those cinematic ticks, and then they absolutely nailed it. I knew I was going to enjoy it when I got to that panel, which was the bat symbol with the 3 laser points. I was like, yes, these guys get it. It doesn't matter where this goes from here. That image is absolutely brilliant.
I think we've got that coming up later in one of the slides, so stick around for that, folks. But it in one sense, it's very slight as a book. It's just like I'm not sure how much advertising they did on this in terms of pushing it. I think all its reputation has come afterwards. And as with a lot of intercompany crossovers, I don't know how much interest there was at the time. I think there's always going to be interest for Marvel versus DC, those crossovers. Always going to be that. Because they're the 2 big names that everyone knows. But I'm trying to think how old I would have been. I'd have been in my late teens, I guess. Sort of 18 or so, 17, 18 when this came out. And you know what? I probably wasn't reading comics at the time. So I probably had come out of comics for whatever reason, which I've done periodically over the years. And as I'm sure I've said before, this is my longest sustained period of comics now. And even I'm beginning to look at like, what's the end going to be? Where's the end point? What's the end game? In a few years.
Every month when I just buy a few more. Like, maybe this will be the last issue. I can't just stop now.
Well, I think that it's funny because I think DC doing the DC Finest is my kind of, actually I could see that in a few years I can start to wind this down now and not maybe not be as obsessive and crazy about it.
Do you know what I try and support? I've kind of cut down on issues I'm buying, but I try and support the things that are really interesting to me month to month. Like, if we're honest, there's always going to be a Batman book. There's always going to be this. But at the moment, I'm definitely in like the Dennis Camp business. Like anything with his name on, I'm buying because I want him to be given more books, whether it be Manhunter or Ultimate for his own image stuff, or Kelly Thompson and things like that. There are certain writers or what have you. And they might not be top of the sales charts. So I'm just buying them so there's more, because if you don't buy it, then how are they going to know that this is popular?
Well, Dennis is interesting because someone was making an argument online the other day, like, is Dennis the best writer around at the moment? Because they were picking out the books he was writing. So he had obviously Absolute Martian Manhunter, Ultimates for Marvel, and then I think 2 others.
There's Assorted Crisis Events.
Assorted Crisis Events for,
and then before that there was 20th Century Men for Image.
Yeah, and someone was saying, is this guy the writer at the moment? It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. I've not read 20th Century Men yet. I think I've probably talked about Dennis Camp before on the website. I'm looking forward to getting into the Ultimates. That's probably next week that I'm reading. I'm going to pick up the Ultimates.
I think his real talent is every individual issue you read of any of the books, whether it be his solo or corporate, for lack of a better term. They feel you know, there's that old adage of any comic book could be your first.
Yeah.
It genuinely feels like that. You could pick up any issue of, say, the Ultimates, and it feels like a complete story from beginning to end.
Okay.
But it does slot into, you know, it is definitely issue 5 of 18 or whatever. But you could just pick up any issue and just completely enjoy it in its entirety. It is like a complete little bottle episode. It's a real skill when most people do write for the trade. It feels, you know, part 1 of 6 or what have you. So, yeah.
Well, I find increasingly there's a pushback on that now, because a lot of readers are like, "Oh, we really want you to go back to just writing 1 issue at a time," and that's an interesting thing. I mean, this was done as a short series. I'm surprised they didn't push this out to 6 or 4, even. Like, I'm surprised it was as short as it
would have ended with Batman being incapacitated for at least 2 issues, which, you know, for 1 issue it feels shocking. For 2, you can't just have Predator versus Man in a Cast. That's not really fair, is it, on Batman?
It's weird because it allows the storyline actually allows the detective elements of Batman to kind of come through, right? He tries to figure out what he's kind of up against. And right from the beginning, there's a kind of grudge and respect from the Predator over, you know, this guy. There's that great moment where Batman sort of just stands out on the street looking up, and he knows the Predator's there, and he's just like, well, what are you going to do? What's the move? And I find that kind of really interesting. But again, it is very slight.
I'm trying to think of the timelines in that. Had the Killing Joke come out? Because there is a moment
definitely.
Okay, so there's the moment where the Predator literally knocks on his door, sort of reenacting the Killing Joke in many ways.
Livery.
Not quite as dark, but you know. But it does feel like the stakes are high in this. Like, for as slight as it is, like, it's definitely like, this isn't continuity. It's not trying to be, but this is Batman. This is Predator. Batman gets absolutely beaten to a pulp.
Oh, definitely.
Gordon's at risk. Like, you know, the stakes are quite high. It is quite thrilling in moment to moment.
There's your bat symbol.
There you go. Like, what more?
In fact, and this is the bit where he stands out onto the street. I always love, when you look at Kubert's work, is the number of kind of almost lapels you get on the cape there down at the bottom, and the fabric of it. I'm
definitely like looking at Batman, and I think he does a similar thing with they do a similar thing with Wolverine. Like, he definitely has something in the way they draw the face and cowl is very striking, I think.
Yes, there. It's almost a kind of, there's like a flamboyance, or a kind of almost operatic. They do capture the operatic moments, as you like that is great. I'm yet to read like I recently read the Wolverine versus Predator, which was good and was entertaining. And it's interesting how they try and bring in, what they're interested in doing is grafting the Predator onto the pre-existing comics world, not necessarily bringing the comic character into this realm of aliens and things like that. I would like to kind of see what would happen if they did that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess it comes down to different writers. So that's Ben Percy for Marvel.
Yeah.
I'm reading the Spider-Man one as well, which is good fun. Because that's during a heat wave in New York. So again, he's nailed the aesthetic of sweaty New York.
Yeah, completely.
I think I was literally sold that on. I think the cover for issue 2 is like Mary Jane ensnared on a subway, being like pulled towards the Predator, and she's absolutely screaming to the cover as Spider-Man trying to save them. Like, yes,
brilliant. Okay,
yes, I'm reading this. Like the Aliens and Avengers stuff is definitely like an elsewhere story, and I think it works better for it.
Right. Okay. So Aliens versus Predator. Aliens, I've not read yet. Aliens versus Avengers, I've not read.
But I think Marvel did quite a good job of, they incorporated briefly Conan into sort of mainline Marvel continuity with the Savage Avengers. I think that was Jerry Duggan, and it was literally Conan's Avengers with people like Venom and Elektra and Punisher. It sounds like a silly idea, but it was genuinely really good fun.
Was that Savage Avengers?
Savage Avengers, that's the one, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was kind of curious how that worked, because that kind of did. I mean, look, all these things smack of kind of, it's a big cash to be made here, boys.
It does, but sometimes you have that alchemy that is like, so as I'm reading this, I'm like, yeah, this smells of cash grab, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, I think everyone has had a great time in the writing, in the drawing, and in the reading. So I'm always pleasantly surprised when the cash grab actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the talent with things that are being done for, and when we say cash grab, we are not trying to be flip or disrespectful to the publishers or anyone like that, or the artists who are creating this stuff. But I can guarantee you now that. So someone was telling me a story about an artist who was doing a book. I won't say which one. And the the publishing company was DC. And they went to this artist, right, we need this, we want this book by this date because we're going to announce. And he said, no. If you announce this book, then I am not going to be able to get the art done, and the book is going to go out late, or later issues of the book will go out late. I am not going to be able to get the art done. If you wait until like the next quarter, and they were like, no, we need a big book for the fourth quarter of whatever year it was. Oh. So we're announcing. And he said, okay, I'm going to tell you again, I'm not going to be able to get this done. They went ahead and announced. And the issues of the book were late, and everyone blamed the artist. And it's just like, but he told you it can only be done in this amount of time. So it is a commercial decision. It is a commercial decision. I would love it if it was all artistic decisions. But when you get to this stage of these characters, it ain't going to be. That's not what's going to happen.
Yeah, but that's what I really enjoy when you do get when you do get people who have actually made some great art out of what easily was just a how do we make money in Q4?
Oh yeah,
And this is wonderful. Like it doesn't have to be this good.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason for it to be this good. You've got Predator and Batman done. Like that would have sold X amount with no effort, and yet, yeah, they've created something like a lot of fun. Like I really laughed out loud in the finale, like the final fight where here's a spoiler for you, where Batman takes a baseball bat and proves that he really is the Batman because he beats the Predator down with a bat. Like that's mad.
But also that is in totally keeping in character with Batman, because there's a thing where he will use anything to hand as a weapon.
I think, isn't it like a sports trophy wall? In fairness,
I can't remember what it is.
The bat is there. It's it's the knife from Jaws situation. There's a bat on the wall. Of course, he's going to use the bat because I think Alfred might have used a hunting rifle. So this is like the Wayne family.
I think that's like I loved Alfred rocking that out. That was that is an elephant gun, I believe.
Yeah.
Because Alfred is not stupid. There's a great thing in, I can't remember if it's I think it's Nightfall where Bane first gets into the house, which we will talk about when we do it. But Alfred just points a shotgun at him and goes like, "I know who you are, and I can assure you that I don't have the same sanctity of life that my master does." And it's just like, yep, because of course you people forget Alfred is a stone cold fucking killer. Alfred did World War II.
But I guess the further away from World War II we get, like there's that kind of sliding scale of you do lose that, because I guess in my mind, like every so often, because this comic's been going on for 80 years, every so often your mind does slide to different versions. Is he Michael Caine? Is he the he's usually depicted as really old, like a really old butler, like early on, isn't it? Like that sort of traditional, what have you. And then every so often you come across, he did have this military or RAF or whatever they deem background.
And I guess as they move, as you say, they move through the timeline. I mean, he's dead now, still in the comics, which is one of the most aggravating things ever. I really don't want Alfred dead. They have to keep moving the conflict on, I guess. I don't know what conflict you'd put him in now if you had to. What would it be? It's not even. You couldn't even put him in Korea because that's too far down the line.
Like, wouldn't something, because there's fake cities obviously in DC. Like in Marvel, you got whole countries don't exist. Could they not have just come up with some fake conflicts between? There's always been a conflict between Wakanda and somewhere else, and someone fought. There's your solution for $5. That will. You don't need to move the Punisher further away from Vietnam into the Gulf War, which does not have the same.
No.
The Vietnam conflict is a very specific thing.
Well, I guess they could do the Corto Maltese, which has been part of DC for years, even though Corto Maltese is actually the name of another comic series, I think, by Hugo Pratt, which I've never read, but I'm assured is a masterwork. Anyway, so yeah, Alfred is a badass. You cannot avoid it. And I actually really like the repartee between Alfred and Bruce in this.
It does end on a zinger, doesn't it? I almost feel like out of nowhere. It's something like it's something like aren't you worried they'll come back? It's like, now that they've met what lives in Gotham, they won't be.
Yeah.
And then Alfred replies like, It's a real hunter's moon tonight. It's like, all right. I guess that's the way to end the comic.
It's great. It's great stuff. And
it's
like,
not deep, but it is cool.
And it is, as you say, it's very much Predator 2. I think
I do. Yeah, the other thing I really enjoyed out of nowhere was, when Batman is beating the living daylights out of the Predator with a bat. I think other Predators come to. I can't remember what they're actually called. They're like the Yakults or something. I can't remember the name of their.
Yutja, something like that.
Something like that.
I can never pronounce it correctly.
But yeah, they come and I think they make, because Batman has beaten this guy, this Predator, they make that Predator commit like seppuku, like the Japanese kind of sword immolation, and then they present Batman with the sword, and it's like, this is wild. Like, because I guess you've had Predator 1 and 2, you're just making up lore now. This is great. They've got off, Dave Gibbons got off the deep end and gone, they're a warrior tribe. Why wouldn't they do samurai stuff? Why not? And it's a great idea.
There are internet reams devoted to this place, to this lore. So I'm sure if we had dug in, if we weren't doing this podcast on such a bone-crunching, mind-crushing schedule, of having to read through all this stuff so fast.
I mean, to me as well, like I'm saying, this is really cool. For me, I love the first Predator film. It's an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. It's great. It's a John McTiernan. It's a key part of me growing up in cinema.
Yeah.
Every other Predator film I could take or leave. I quite enjoyed Prey, but honestly, the rest of them, aside from the first,
I loved Predator 2 at the time. I think now it has its flaws, but it's still quite enjoyable. I liked Predators because there was enough interesting stuff in that.
I think visually it's very cool. Like the idea of like a samurai going up against a predator, like all those little things, cool.
I really loved Prey. Like I thought Prey.
I did really enjoy that. But what I'm saying is just the name recognition alone of something versus Predator doesn't get me excited.
I think
it's testament to this that actually it had all the things I really enjoyed about Predator. Like there's a point where I think Batman lures him into traps a la Arnie on Wayne Manor, and the Predator does his petulant, well, fine, if I can't catch you, I'm just going to blow us all up. And Batman has to short circuit his bomb.
Yeah.
But I love that petulant. Like, I find it bizarre that the Predator's like, they're this honor-based species of warrior, when every time it doesn't go their way, they try and blow everything up. So what is it? Are they noble alien samurai, or are they petulant teenagers on a hunt?
I think there's something in that where I think the older ones are meant to be like the nobility, and the younger ones are meant to be like
because I guess they can't prove themselves, and
the whole Aliens versus Predator is meant to be a rite of passage type thing, like where they're hunting the aliens.
Right.
Have you ever read that, the Dark Horse Aliens versus Predator?
No, I don't think so.
Right. I
think I've seen the first film. I haven't seen the second one where they're fighting in like supermarkets or something.
Yeah, fuck all that. But I would definitely seek out the Alien versus Predator, the first comic series, because that is. Well, if I ever see another copy again, I'll pick it up for you. But ultimately, like I don't really like intercompany crossovers. Like I honestly couldn't give a monkeys if Superman can beat the Sentry or if Batman can beat Daredevil. I don't care. Ultimately, I don't. I've always found.
Wait, what's the contest? Batman beating Daredevil? What, financially? With martial arts? Begging women?
But you know what I mean? I don't.
Ridiculous women.
I don't. It's true. Dating ridiculous women and then getting them killed, I think, would be.
I think, yeah, who would win on that? God. Yeah, it'd be tight. I think it'd be a draw in the end, maybe.
Yeah, it'd be like a game of Snap. But I, whenever I end up reading them, I nearly always enjoy them. I think where I draw the line are things like Batman TMNT, which I'm sure are really enjoyable. But I think that's where I'm kind of.
Do you know what? I was really surprised when I think there was like a Batman Scooby-Doo mystery thing announced.
Right.
And there were genuine people like hollering and going like in excitement for it being collected.
Yeah.
And like, wait, what? But that's just my ignorance of looking at something else and that's just for kids, isn't it? I'm reading Batman. Come on, get it.
I think one of the reasons they've gone back to doing intercompany crossovers now, one of the reasons why the Marvel and DC crossover is coming back is because I think as corporate entities, they've both been really burned on the movies, on the expense of those movies. And what they've come to realize is the same thing that anyone in the entertainment industry is realizing, is that it's now becoming very nicheified. People's tastes are becoming really nicheified. And what's going to happen is people will start, as in fact they've already done because they're a bunch of fucking idiots, typing into a computer, I want to see this, I want this, and I want it to look like this. And the computer's just going to go, bloop, there you are, and it will shit out a horrible looking.
Apparently, YouTube is going to have an AI slot button. So instead of even watch a video and then be served another similar video, I think you can just press a button and it will create some nonsense for you. So you could watch this and then have two complete AI random people discuss pretend Batman books, maybe.
I've got to say, folks,
that sounds like hell.
Yeah. If you do that, fuck you, don't watch this show. Don't watch any show that I do, even though my audience, I don't give a shit about the audience numbers, but don't watch any show I do. Don't read my website. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
I'll wear my Destroy AI t-shirt just for you next week.
Yeah. I think
I've worn to meetings.
Not to take us on another massive tangent, of which I am the master.
But anyway, Batman, Predator, thumbs up.
Yeah, I thought it's a solid, well-written, well-drawn book.
And like I say, I found those issues you've got, I found those free on eBay. I think it was under £15, which I was surprised by. The
separate issues or for the book? There you go.
All for £15, which I was surprised by.
See, now that's quite expensive for free issue.
Yeah, but that's roughly the price of comics now, right?
Yeah. Very true. Very.
And he's got Batman and Predator cards in the back.
Oh, nice! You got the ones they still had the trading cards because a lot of those would have been cut out. I found an issue of a comic the other day, one of mine. And I was flicking through it, and it still had when Predator 2 came out, they did this big advertising campaign where they put a big insert in comics with a perforated line that had like images from the film and stuff like that, and it was great. And I happily tore that out. And, I'm putting that aside to keep in the archive of bullshit. Because I used to love that sort of level of advertising, which you don't get now. You will not get. Because unless someone can advertise it to you on this fucking screen, they're not interested in advertising it to you. You don't get memorabilia anymore.
I remember going to, I think it was a Virgin Megastore in central London, just to go it might have only been the Alien quadrilogy at the time, inside the Alien head. Like,
sure. I remember that. So
wow, on DVD, I think it was maybe.
When I started work, when I was like 17, one of the first fucking big things I brought, funny enough, was they did the Alien trilogy VHS in a face hugger case box set, and although I regrettably don't have the box anymore because it was quite big because it was meant to house VHSs. I still have all the booklets and stuff that came with that box, so I managed to keep all that. Although I don't think I've got the art cards anymore, like the lobby cards. I think they're gone. They're lost in a...
When would you have seen those? The art cards, you see them briefly when I take.
Yeah, I mean it's you know, our other big thing that we get together and we talk about once every few months in London. We all go to dinner with our friend Ed. He won't watch this show, but hey Ed. We talk about the sort of film industry and especially the home entertainment industry, and I am now starting to turn against the here's a booklet and a bunch of art cards, and now this thing's going to cost you 50 quid. I've started to move away from that. Although I still love it. I still think those things are beautiful. However, being fucking broke ain't cool. Poverty is not fun. Judge Dredd, Batman Judge Dredd. We should move on to this.
This isn't technically versus. This is Batman.
This isn't a versus. We should have said at the beginning. I did mean to say at the beginning. One of these is a versus. The other is Abbott and Costello meets. So this was. I also think this was done in the late 90s. I want to say early 90s. And this is Batman encounters Judge Death. It should really be Batman versus Judge Death. That's what it could be.
Sure. I mean, there is a distinct lack of Dredd in this. Like, it is Batman and the world of Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
But I'm not that well versed in Judge Dredd personally. I've read some. I used to read, I think it was in the Metro when the Metro first launched. It was there. It was actually written, I think, among other people. Simon Spurrier was one of the writers.
Probably, yeah.
Back then.
That might be one of the early things he was doing.
I've read some of like the classic stories and what have you, but I've not read 3,000 issues, 3,000 progs or whatever. But I did enjoy how, even though I wasn't well versed, I knew who Judge Anderson was. I knew Judge Death, etc. But I like how it took you on that journey into the world, and it took you along. It gave you all the information you needed. It wasn't like I didn't feel lost at any moment. No,
and it's a great, like it is a kind of full introduction into those kind of worlds. So we start with Judge Death traveling interdimensionally into Gotham, and murdering a couple of people. Batman trying to stop him, and then getting kind of sucked back into that kind of dimensional portal. I don't think it's ever really fully explained how that's happening. It is some sort of runaway tech.
It's like a weird, a weird special belt that Judge Death and is it Mean Machine? I think they've stolen. There's the gimmick, and he's jumping through realities. I
mean, I like it. I love the thing of Batman winding up in Mega City, and of course being a person who comes from a huge metropolis, being utterly kind of blown away by the kind of enormity of Mega City.
What is this?
I think Mega City is one of the great creations in comics, as is Judge Dredd, because Judge Dredd allows you to kind of cathartically excise all your urban fears, and also cathartically excise all your need for instant justice, you know. Like and I mean, I as I've discussed before, I am, whilst not like, I'm not right wing, I'm very left wing, but I'm also quite, I believe in the need for strong law and order. Like I genuinely do. And part of this is getting older and just looking at the state of things and going, fucking hell, that's what fucked. Anyway, and I think that the Judge Dredd is one of those creations that allows you the satisfaction of the kind of quite police, you know, it is a police state, you know, but it's a police state in which it's constantly poked and taken the piss out of. But also it shows you, I think, when you look at Megacity and the population of Megacity and how they behave and how they act, it's like, well, what makes people that way? Because it's a society that's allowed to do whatever it wants. And I think that's part of the problem. I think it is kind of saying, well, this is what happens when you allow people to just do whatever they want. They will not restrain themselves in any way. They'll become fat and enormous and so big they have to be wheeled around. They'll engage in violence out of boredom, with just because someone lives in a different street, and you know, all that stuff. And I think what is that saying? But then it also says that the police state is kind of wrong, because Dredd constantly is a figure of fun, even by other judges.
He's an absolute dick in this.
Yeah.
But I'm interested because I know that Judge Anderson is from like the side division, so she's different.
Yeah,
like different type of judge. Are the other judges like Judge Dredd or Joe Dredd, or I know he sort of stands above them? Are the rest of the judges similar to him, or is he seen as the most judgy judge? Because he is very much, with Batman, he's like, well, look, you've got bat pellets, that's 5 years in the ISO cube. You've got shark tranquilizer, that's another 10 years.
Yeah.
Which leads to that great moment where I think Batman just loses it with him, punches him in the face. I think Judge Dredd's like, well, that's another 10 years. And Batman answers back, well, make it 20. Gives him a kick in the ribs.
We can see that glorious moment there.
Oh, it's absolutely
Which is actually, it's interesting that we get this frame as well, because there's obviously the very famous Bolland drawing of Dredd punching Judge Death in the face, where it's, gaze into the face of death, and Judge Dredd punches him in the face and says, gaze into the fist of Dredd. It's just a really famous comic moment. And I think that is kind of a very nice play on that.
I was kind of surprised that happened in this, because, again, that kind of corporate crossover in my head was saying, there's like rumors with like some Hollywood stars, when they're in fight sequences, there has to be equal punches thrown. Like someone can't be beaten heavier than the other one. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's definitely like those rumors of certain fight sequences are they're filmed in a certain way because one actor doesn't want to be seen to be weaker than the other actor. Like, it's a real macho nonsense. And I kind of thought that there'd be something in place like that, but not really, because they're quite happy with Judge Dredd just taking a real fist in the face from Batman.
Well, I'd be interested to read this up against the next one, which is Die Laughing, I think is the next one that Bisley and... So this is written by John Wagner and drawn by Simon Beasley. And I'd be wondering if the other one is more Dredd-centric, because, as you say, he doesn't really appear in this. I suspect the thing you're talking about, whilst these days will be legally enforced and boilerplate in the contracts, back then it was just a gentleman's agreement over a pint.
I was going to say, because Wagner is very much like a Judge Dredd writer, isn't he?
And a Batman writer.
Oh, okay.
He co-wrote with Alan Grant a ton of Batman stories in the 80s. They were like the Batman writers, so they were doing the run.
Okay, so he was well versed in both. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So when I saw his name, I just associate him with Judge Dredd primarily.
So I always thought, I think I misread something that was published a while ago in a back issue, the magazine back issue, that said that John Wagner didn't actually write those Detective Comics issues for which he's credited. It was just contracted that he would, but it wasn't. It was like one or two of the issues he was credited for, he didn't write. But by and large, the issues he was credited for, he wrote. So he, in fact, wrote the issue that the logo for this podcast comes from. Like, so that Batman Standing in the Rain is part of a cover from an issue of Detective Comics. I can't remember 589 or something like that. So he was well versed in both. So he would have known how far he could push it. I think he probably finds the concept of Batman quite preposterous in a way. And I wonder if Alan Grant kind of reined in a lot of Wagner's kind of. It's Wagner and Grant on this. So it's Alan Grant and Jog. No.
I'm sure I read that Wagner and Grant, they were so prolific on Judge Dredd that sometimes there were other fictional writers credited for Judge Dredd
it's entirely
because they were so prolific and they wrote so much. They didn't want to make it seem like they were churning out so much, but they literally were this creative driving force that would just.
It's entirely possible because back then they would have only had to do 8 pages at a time.
That's true, yeah. But it is a weekly comic, wasn't it? 2000.
Yeah,
it still is, isn't it? Still
weekly. But those stories would have been done in 8-page segments, and I think there might have been some issues where they would have gotten a break where there wasn't a Judge Dredd story. I doubt it, but because when you have Strontium Dog and things like that. That might run for 8 parts or 12 parts or 20 parts, but then that will stop and some other strip will come in and fill that gap. So this is Grant and Wagner on this book. I think they both would have known how far they could push it. For me, this is a bit too nuts and a bit too crazy. I think that's partly down to Bisley's art. I really appreciate Bisley's art in a way that you can appreciate any kind of really good, interesting images.
Okay, I think I
don't love him as like he's not my favorite comic artist. I still think he's a good artist. Do not get me wrong. I think I probably loved his Slonia stuff for 2000 AD.
Okay, I think I enjoyed this more than you, and probably
I think you might
to do with the art, because I was thinking I just can't think of another book that looks like this. Like,
no,
it's like the whole thing feels stunning to me. It does feel like it feels very heavy metal, and I mean that both in the sense of that magazine, like the kind of covers you would see on the cover of heavy metal, but also like 80s or heavy metal bands. Like it feels like
which actually makes sense for Bisley, because that's how he got his start, I believe. I think he was doing album covers for heavy metal bands. And later in this, there is a heavy metal band. I mean, it's all kind of. Absolutely.
But comics don't look like this. Like,
no,
like every so often there'd just be a full page, and like, this is what.
And this is what's interesting when we talk about these full pages. So we had a look there at the That one there, right?
Mm.
And then
that's
that one.
I think that's the mind of Batman when Anderson looks at it, and it's absolute firework.
And you know, I think this is done for two reasons. One, obviously, artistic expression. I'm not sure. I don't know if Wagner and Grant would have written these into the script. I'm not sure how kind of focused their scripts are in terms of panel 1, panel 2. I've never read their script, so I don't know. If someone in the audience knows, please do tell us. If you like, I'm sure it's been well documented, their writing process. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about that. I suspect that a reason, and I don't mean this in a cynical kind of cash grab kind of way. I suspect the reason why you see so many of these big panels is I don't know if the book was published in the form that I've got it first or the form that you've got it first. If it was published in the form that I've got it first, then yes, this would have been totally what you would do. You would do these big single panel pages with maybe one or two little box out panels there.
I mean, I love that image of Judge Dredd. He's trying to reconstitute his uniform in Gotham using whatever disregarded,
whatever the Scarecrow and
it's absolutely ridiculous.
I think it's one of the Tweedledum Tweedledee twins that are helping him.
I can't think of other artists like I was looking, because I really like, I can't pronounce his name. When you suddenly realise, I've never said this guy's name out loud. But, I'm gonna pronounce it Bill Sienkiewicz.
Sienkiewicz.
Sienkiewicz. Now,
yeah.
So I remember reading New Mutants when I was younger. So I think the Demon Bear stuff he drew. But that's not that's its own thing entirely.
Yeah.
But that's a similar vibe in, whoa, this is really different. That I guess, or someone like Dave McKean, which was Arkham Asylum, very, very painted. It's completely different styles, but those are the only artists I could think of. Oh wow, where you really sit back and you think, this doesn't feel like someone that does comics all the time.
Well, I think
they come to this almost as an art piece. It's really interesting.
So Bisley, he started out doing other things. Sienkiewicz would have undoubtedly done other kinds of illustration, but as most comic artists do, a lot of them are paying the bills by doing ad work or storyboarding or film concept work. In the case of McKean, he really pioneered the use, especially with those Sandman covers, the use of mixed media. So he was photographing, I think that very first Sandman cover is a piece of art in a wooden frame with actual objects, and then it's the photograph of that, and then he's gone in and retouched it afterwards. I think the reason why, what I did want to try and get to, is the reason why you get to these big single panels is because obviously one of the ways that comic artists can make money, if they're working in traditional forms where you get a physical painting, digital art is nearly impossible, but is done by selling the art, selling the original art for quite large sums of money, which I completely agree with, and I think it's great. It's kind of a shame. I've known one or two artists that actually don't sell their original art. They will keep, because they're just like, nah, I'm not saying that. I keep it. I think Mike Perkins, who is genuinely one of my favorite artists, and who I've interviewed 2 or 3 times. I absolutely love the guy, and I think he's only just started selling his original art. But he works traditionally, and one of the reasons I've asked him in interviews, why do you not work digitally? And he's like, because I want to have the thing to sell. That's my money. That's So I suspect it's kind of done. The reason why Bisley has done so many of these single panel pages is because that'll be really easy to sell. Like lots of people will buy like page 8 of a comic when not much happens or it's not really a big. But people really want the big splash pages or the covers or this or that or they really want the specific.
Talking of, I guess, splash pages, I don't think it's in your images, but when we're introduced to Judge Anderson, those introductory panels, I think are some of the thirstiest things I've ever seen in a in a Batman comic.
Well, that is Bisley all over.
I mean, it almost feels like the underwear has been drawn on as some kind of compromise, like it wasn't originally there.
I mean, Anderson is always quite a sexy character.
That's what I was wondering. Is that unusual? But away from the first traps, I was going to say, like, I think later when she's introduced, like properly with clothes on, like the texture of her hair, it's like this frizzy. I don't know how you even draw that. Like, I really enjoyed the art, and maybe it's because I don't think Bisley has done that much comics. He's not that prolific.
Well, he has done a ton of British stuff, and like the thing is with Bisley is I find it's not that it's bad comic art. I just find it a bit too outre for me, and it's quite often employed on characters that I don't really like that much, and I think that's my problem. He's not a bad artist at all. He's an amazing artist, but it's not always gonna be for me,
Batman's ears too big for you? Were Batman's ears too big, or do you like really?
That was crazy. Yeah, they're outrageous. Yeah,
they were really.
I think the closest thing you get to Bisley's art now, is a guy called Sam Keith, but Sam Keith now, not Sam Keith back when this was being done.
Okay.
But yeah, you should check out some of Sam Keith's stuff because that's not always for me. But I need to kind of read a bit more. And with Bisley, I tell you where his stuff really works for me, which absolutely does work, is Slonia, or Slain as it's called, which is the kind of Conan-esque strip that I think it was Pat Mills created for 2000 AD back in the 80s. And that's good stuff. So that's very kind of, wenches and, swords, shirtless warriors. That was great stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine that's his.
Yeah.
Would be playing to the Stramps. Yeah.
Yeah. And that stuff is, I think he did a thing called The Horned God. I think that's him. And that's wild. It's been so long since I've read it though. But that stuff is stuff that you should definitely kind of seek out. A lot of 2000 AD stuff is really worth getting into, and especially now they
might just be the sheer quantity.
Yeah,
but then I guess I can say that about Batman or any comic, because I guess it's always a hard place of where do you start. Although saying that, I guess. Some of my favorite writers will have definitely written Judge Dredd, so I can start there. Absolutely. I know that Morrison and what have you would have written Judge Dredd. But,
I don't know if Morrison ever did. I think he only ever did one. Mark Millar certainly did some Dredd stuff, or some Dredd adjacent stuff. There's a guy called Alex Worley who I really like as a person and as a writer. He's done some really great Dredd stuff. The things to look for are of course, Halo Jones, Alan Moore, Skiz by Alan. Anything that Alan Moore did for 2000 AD was insane. Zenith by Morrison is.
Yeah, I've got. You know what? I've got quite a nice edition of that from. 2000 AD. It's really nice.
Yeah, you should definitely, if you've not already dug into that.
I did read recently, I think it was Garth Ennis's Rogue Trooper is great fun because obviously Garth Ennis in any war setting is an instant great.
That's his thing. That's his.
It's his bread and butter. It's just and he just finds new ways to bring a battlefield to life.
Yeah.
And this time it's with the Rogue Trooper, and it's absolutely great.
And also, the one thing I do absolutely recommend, if you can find the right edition of it, is Maze World by Arthur Ranson. I can't remember who wrote it. Let me just grab it. I think that's Alan Grant. I've just got to reach over to the shelf here. Sorry, folks. So yeah, that's Alan Grant as well. That I highly recommend. Anything by Arthur Ranson. He's just one of the greatest artists of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And genuinely one of the loveliest people I've ever met. But yeah, so 2000 AD. It's interesting to see the authoritarianism of Batman, or supposed authoritarianism of Batman, meet the authoritarianism of Judge Dredd, because it's true fascism meeting this kind of pseudo. I don't know what you'd call it. Like the
I
pseudo...
know what you mean. I did think, well, again, it was that moment where Judge Dredd is just reeling through the charges. Yeah. Like any criticism of Batman as fascist, like immediately just falls apart in this sequence when he's against.
But they're all things he would have been charged with in his dimension. Like if the police caught Batman and actually did what they were supposed to,
they wouldn't catch Batman. That's the difference.
No, they probably wouldn't. But if the police caught Batman, it'd be looking at enough charges to put him away for decades.
That's why he befriends Gordon. That's the true reason. Yeah. Just get out of jail free card.
Oh, do us a favour, mate. Look, I may have blown up, let's say, half a city block, taking down a meth lab last week. If you wouldn't mind, just brushing that one under the carpet for us.
I also like, actually, that, jumping around. Like, to be honest, like the story, there's not much to it.
No, there isn't. It's
they're just Batman meets Death, gets sucked into Mega City 1 world, gets back with Anderson to track down Judge Death. They go to a metal concert. Judge Death has teamed up with Scarecrow. I think Judge Death is about to kill Batman, and Judge Dredd saves him with a gun, which I thought was a nice irony.
Yeah.
But then obviously Batman returns the favor, saves Judge Dredd, and that's pretty much it. But the one thing I did like in all of that is that Judge Dredd doesn't really compromise. Like Judge Anderson, he has to leave because Judge Anderson is containing Judge Death in her mind. And it's like, we've got to get this thing somewhere else. And he's like, all right, fine. But he doesn't want to let it go.
I mean, it's weird because Judge, it is very in terms of how completely wild it is very much a Judge Dredd story, even though it's not set in Mega City 1 apart from that interlude. But it's a Batman story morally, I think. Because Judge Dredd stories are nuts. They're insane. They are completely insane. There's things, I can't remember what was the great one. There was one where someone invented this spray that when you sprayed it, it created like a bubble, like Zorbin.
Yeah.
Right? And you could just bounce yourself around the city. I think, people start to die. There was another one where a woman was hunted down by the judges because she was turning into a spider. And of course, my all-time favorite, which I actually will do an entirely separate podcast on one day. One of the earliest ones I ever read, drawn by Steve Dillon, and I think written by one of the Wagner Grant brothers. Cry of the Werewolf, which is one of the greatest comics I think ever written.
Wow.
In my opinion, where they discover a race of werewolves living underneath Mega City.
Of course.
And but it's like, it's amazing. But that is Judge Dredd stories for you.
I think this did a great job of making me more interested in reading Judge Dredd stuff.
Yeah.
Because it does give you a taste of madness. Whether it be like Mean Machine with his little dials of whatever.
And it's completely... Yeah. And
the way
the thing is, like Judge Dredd, they're very...
People.
Yeah, the heart, reaching into the heart and thing, which is always a great moment.
It's really creepy.
So do you know about the other dark judges? So there are actually a bunch of them.
I know there are others because I've seen pictures, but I don't think I've ever read that specific run. So who are the dark judges?
So it's Judge Death. God, can't remember now. I should have done more research on this. Judge Death, Judge Mortis, Judge. I think I want to say there's like Judge Pestilence.
Right.
So they're almost like the four horsemen of the apocalypse in a way. Okay. But those Judge Death stories are the dark judge stuff are great. And Judge Dredd is worth reading. And if you can get, I would recommend, like the very early ones are quite different from what comes after. And it's really the sort of mid-80s upwards where I think it really kind of solidifies into what we now know as Judge Dredd. And if you can get like I think they're called the Complete Judge Dredd or the Essential Judge Dredd or something like that.
The Case Files, maybe?
Yes. Yeah. There you go. Case Files.
I think I always see them in like local comic book shops, like volumes 1 to 70. It was like...
There's a ton of them, and that's the trouble is you couldn't keep them all because there are just fucking so many. And I think there's a great writer called Rob Williams who's made a fantastic job now of creating some great Dredd stories where they start to kind of re-examine the kind of almost extremism of the law. Reflecting what's going on in society, because I think Judge Dredd was a reaction to what was perceived to, or a reaction to the media attitude of what was going on in society. And of course, Mike Mulcher, who works for Rebellion that owns 2000 AD, he did a great book called I Am the Law, which is how it's like Judge Dredd influenced British policing, basically. And I think where he draws a kind of simile between what was going on in Judge Dredd and what was going on in British policing during the 80s, which is a fascinating read, very in depth and worth getting. I mean, I'm yet to read all the other. I've got all these crossovers like Vendetta in Gotham or Vendetta in Mega City 1, whatever it's called, and Die Laughing, and I can't. There's another one like The Ultimate Riddle, I think it's called, is the other one. There's about 4 of them.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously there is, we mentioned at the beginning, there was Batman, Deadpool's coming, and I think it will have other things like Daredevil, Green Arrow, and what have you.
Yeah.
Could you imagine a Judge Dredd crossover now with other things? We are living in that world where Godzilla seems to be stampeding through both Marvel and DC universes. Do you think Judge Dredd could cross over again?
Possibly. They've done internal crossovers where I think Judge Dredd has met like Strontium Dog,
right,
and another character from 2000 AD, which is something I never thought I would see. Because part of the pleasure of 2000 AD is that these universes are separate and they're creating whole worlds anew for you in every strip. And I bet it's why a lot of writers loved working on it, because they were just being able to create wild shit.
It's like a who's who of great.
Oh yeah,
writers and artists. When you see who's gone through those doors, it's absolutely.
If you were a British writer, you worked on 2000 AD. You know, you would have done a 2000 AD at some stage, or you would have done what they called a Future Shocks, and those are definitely worth reading if you get the chance.
I'm pretty sure there was a sort of tease announced of, I think it's Alan Moore collected Future Shocks maybe next year.
So I
something.
think they're going to do their goal is to do like the complete Future Shocks.
Okay.
I picked up a Future Shocks book because it contained very early work by my now very sadly dearly departed friend Gary Leach. He was an amazing artist. Gary was the guy that did Miracle Man, or back then Marvel Man for Alan Moore, like the first sort of arc of that. So that's Gary Leach's work. And I used to love hanging out with Gary. And he passed away a couple of years back. He was very good friends with myself and Liz. Liz was particularly close to Gary. They'd been friends for a long time, and I picked up the Future Shocks because a lot of his work is in it, and that was amazing going through that and watching his progression as an artist. But 2000 AD is something to get into. It's something you can get into quite easily. I think very occasionally, once a year, they do like an all jumping on issue where every story will be part one, and then you can choose to follow it every week if you want.
Well, then I'm gonna throw it out to people. Recommend me a 2000 AD. Doesn't even have to be right. Recommend me a 2000 AD story. Let's see if any consensus is arrived.
So
let's get me reading. Let's get me adding more books to my to read pile. Let's do it.
So you can drop those comments in the description box below, into the comment section rather, or on social media at the Comic Crush on Blue Sky. At the Comic Crush.bsky.social is the preferred Comic Crush social, or Facebook. On there, if you find the Comic Crush page when we put this episode out, just drop it in the comments for us. Or find me, Paul, on Facebook, or you can go to Instagram at the Comic Crush, or Threads at the Comic Crush. Just drop it into the comment section of all the replies of this particular episode. You won't be able to do it on the website because I don't allow comments on the website because I am not fucking stupid. I'm an idiot, but I ain't stupid. And the website takes up every day of my life, most of the hours of my day. I'm not spending the day curating your angry comments about how you feel about whatever you've just read, because I love you and I'm interested to hear what you say. But I've got a life, folks. But we do want to hear you. We do want to hear your comments. If you've got any comments on the podcast, that as we recording wise, we are edging closer to the end of our time recording this, even though this episode may come at any stage. We don't know what stage it's going to come to, but we're in the real world. We are edging closer to the end. We've only got a few more episodes to record of this, and then we're done with it. And we'll just be back for the replies episodes. We're exhausted. Thanks for asking.
No one made you read Batman Weekly.
Yeah. No. Well, I think you did, actually.
Yeah, no, I have made you. But I mean, yeah, I think I was saying before we jumped onto the podcast, I keep reading other things, like other lengthy things that should be read. Like I read all of Ramvi's Detective Comments Batman.
Yeah.
We're not playing. That's
we may do it in the next season, because I think we probably will go for a second.
I guess you could. It is split into 5 specific sections, and I thought it was possibly one of the best modern Batman stories I've read in quite a while. I really enjoyed it.
Having done this now, and as I said, in the real world, we are reaching the end of the process, even though for you this might be episode 3 or 4 or 1 or 2. I've really enjoyed doing it, and I would definitely like to do it again, but I think we'll change the way we do it to make it a bit easier on ourselves. So it might be less books or a shorter season, because we, 11 episodes or 12 episodes, whatever it is we decide for this, plus the extra stuff we're doing.
My only worry, Paul, is that we get sidetracked very easily. So even if we said, let's just do one issue or one book so we can have a short podcast, it would be the same amount of time. We would.
It's true. Every week.
So I think what I enjoyed about that Ram V one is that it felt I hadn't read this vibe of Batman for a while. It's definitely got that kind of, because if you sit and think about it, it's happening or it's published at the same time as the Chip Zdarsky stuff.
Yeah.
But they do not. There is absolutely no connective tissue at all, apart from maybe who the commissioner is at any one time.
Yeah.
And even that doesn't completely match up at times. But it's fine reading it after the fact because it doesn't matter because they are completely separate things. But the vibe of it is just completely different, and it's like when we dive into these older books and it has a completely different feel, and that's what I really enjoyed about it. It just didn't feel like you can pick it up and it just feels like it slots into any part of the Batman mythology. It's not necessarily here and now, even though it is like a new story.
Well, Batman has its own chronology, and what I like, probably the same things you like, is the fact that a writer can come along and go, okay, I'm just going to stick this in that bit of the chronology. What was he doing that week? What was he doing that year? What happened after year 2? What happened in between year 2 and year 1? I'll just stick that there. And
I think my own headcanon would be it has to happen before the fail-safe arc begins. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense for them to be happening. I think it allows for that because otherwise, you can't imagine him fighting his life, falling from the sky, from low orbit on Tuesday, and then taking on the organs on a Thursday. That just doesn't mesh. So.
Well, there's one of my favourite issues, and because it's utterly ludicrous, is there was an annual they did, which was written by Tom King, drawn by Jorge Fornes, and it's a thing of beauty, which is a diary, Alfred's diary of like 1 month or so, or like a few months in Bruce's life. And they're like, one of them, he's fighting a fucking dragon. He's literally diving off a building with a sword in his hand into the mouth of this dragon, and it's utterly ludicrous, even because it doesn't really fit in what my view of Batman is or should be. But who cares? Because it's just and ultimately, when I say, this art, I don't really like this art, this and that. Ultimately, who cares? Because it's comics, and comics are malleable, and characters are malleable, and the world of comics is completely malleable, and that's one of the things to love about it. Right, so you've got the socials at the Comic Crush, Threads, Instagram at the Comic Crush.bsky.social, on YouTube, the Comic Crush channel, Facebook, find us, just the Comic Crush. Do tune in for the next episode. Remember, on the socials right now, there will be a sort of informal poll of what theme you would like us to tackle in the next episode. You pick that theme. That's what we'll be doing. The episode will go out. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for everyone who's interacted so far. And thank you so much for watching, as always. As much as we do this for our own amusement and for ourselves, we're nothing without an audience. So we really appreciate you being there. Cheers, guys. I'm calling it quits now. We've done this for nearly 2 hours. Bye.
Bye.